Destruction of thought. I had taken 25I multiple times in 1 milligram doses and unhappy with the experience I had 5 days prior, so I decided to kick it up a notch. At about 10:30, I stuck the 2 1 milligram blotters in my upper lip and waited for the effects to kick in. I knew about vasoconstriction, but didn't really experience much at 1 milligram, so I assumed it wouldn't be too bad at this dose. I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't experience any and had known weed to work well at preventing LSA vasoconstriction, so I smoked some as well about 30 minutes after taking the 25I. At first, I just really felt like a strong stoned feeling. As time went on, I became more anxious and my body started tingling. I didn't have a watch with me after this time, so I can't be sure how long this period lasted, but it seemed to last for a while. During this period, I took a walk, and soon objects started to distort, blending together slightly. Lights as well became brighter, and rays of lights were cast fairly far past them. This was a state I was familiar with. As more time passed, I started to become nervous. My head began racing, and that started to frighten me. I know what vasoconstriction feels like, and I wasn't feeling too much effects from that. Had I been sober, I would have known to just ride it out. However, I was not sober. My thought process was starting to deteriorate. I couldn't remember many things about who I was or my life. I was panicking. I woke my mom up and had her drive me to the hospital. There I was asked my date of birth and I could not remember it. Yet strangely, while I could not remember when I was born, I was able to travel to periods of my life. I could think and experience things from my past. Visually, I could see and feel them happening inside my head, though I had no control over where I was going. I struggled to think. I had the doctors reassure me I wasn't going to die, which they did. My memory and perception were both terrible. I couldn't tell what was really going on. Objects were still swirling together. I was seeing very vivid fractal designs. Perhaps the most interesting part were the closed-eye visuals. I could not tell the difference between when my eyes were open or closed. I can't recall what exactly I saw, but it must have very closely resembled the real world, for I cannot differentiate between the two. During this time, I was asked several questions by the doctors, none of which I could answer properly. I didn't like them asking me these questions. If someone said something to me I didn't like, I started to dislike the person, which is not something I ever normally do. The whole time the body load was a bit uncomfortable. It was like an uncomfortable orgasm going on throughout my body. It felt good and bad at the same time. Not of the tingling or pains I had experienced with vasoconstriction, and my veins seemed to be normal size, as well as my hands were a healthy red color, so I can only assume the feeling was a product of psychological effects of the drug and not any actual physical side effects. Though my memory wasn't very good, so I can't say for sure. Time was at a standstill. Everything seemed to last for an eternity. I kept waiting for myself to die, for everything to end, not sure of why I was alive or what I was doing here, yet I kept going. It was like I had no idea what life or my own consciousness was, and I expected it to just seize at any moment. I remember at one point during the night, I couldn't differentiate between words and tangible objects, and it seemed as if I could see words. See them, understand them. It was almost like I myself was a word, and as my thought process continued and I thought new things, I became those new words. Another interesting quality was the headspace. Now I have heard this term before but never had it described to me, so I'm not sure if I'm using it correctly. It is the word that best fits though, sorry if it isn't the accurate term. It seemed that my mind was actually physical and I could walk around inside of it, which is how I got from one thought to the next. Perhaps this is why I had perceived myself to be words. It was like a big physical area inside my body that I had access to, and I could access any part of it I liked. Well, that's what it seemed like, but as I mentioned before, I had no control what thoughts came into my head. With my memory shot so badly, I assumed that I must have been an alien trapped inside a human's body. Obviously, this was not the case, but I couldn't even really remember who I was, and this world seemed so foreign and strange to me, it really seemed like I must have been an alien. While I did not have a clock throughout most of the night, I distinctly remember seeing strong visuals at around 3 a.m. when I finally went around to bed. Light seemed to make them stronger. In the dark, it just seemed like rays coming out of the alarm clock and extending into the darkness. When I would periodically get up to go to the bathroom though, as soon as I turned on the light, it was like everything in my bathroom was swirling together. Vivid fractals and blending patterns. The fractals at this time were more fluid than ever and very dark green in color. It was a shade of green I had never seen before and didn't like it, to tell the truth. This went on until about 6:30 a.m. The effects were slowly dissipating. Once they were over, my mind was still racing and it was very hard to get sleep, though that was something I was used to. All in all, it was very enjoyable, even with the doctors nagging me. Once I had their word I wasn't going to die and I would be safe, I would stop worrying, and when I did, most negative aspects of the trip were gone. While I know it wasn't necessary to go to the hospital, I am glad I went, because it helped me to get out of the bad part of the trip. I have no idea what my mom thinks of all this. I don't want to talk to her about it again, though I know it will come up. My philosophy on that thought is I would rather be alive and have her upset with me than dead, regardless of how she felt. And with that state of mind I was in, I really did feel like I was going to die before I got to the hospital. To be blunt, the effects at 2 milligrams, even with having taken the drug 5 days prior, were vastly stronger than at 1 milligram. At 1 milligram, I barely got any visuals. There were some rays casted off objects and some fractals, but nothing vivid, and my perception of the world and my thought process remained fairly normal. I was not prepared for how intense this trip would be. The effects were far more than twice as strong. Be careful when taking higher doses of these chemicals. I have taken it and other psychedelics before, but never experienced something quite like this. While I told my mother and the doctors I wouldn't do it again, I think I will, though I never plan to take that high of a dose with 25I again. If it wasn't for the racing heart rate, I don't think things would have gone out of hand at the beginning. Still a great experience though, and again, despite my mom finding out and going to the hospital, I think it was worth it. I wish I could put this into better words, but the psychedelic experience is something I have a lot of trouble describing, and my memory of the time isn't the best.